It has been called the most beautiful object ever made by human hands. For nearly a century, it has stared back at visitors from behind its glass in the Cairo Egyptian Museum, serene, golden, impossibly perfect. School children draw it, scientists study it, governments protect it. It is the golden death mask of Tutankhamun, a pharaoh who died at just 19 years old, yet whose face has become the face of ancient Egypt itself. But in a quiet, white-walled laboratory not far from that famous display case, a team of physicists and archaeologists gathered around a machine that fires invisible waves through solid metal. And when those waves passed through 10 kilograms of 3,000-year-old gold, they revealed something that shook the entire field of Egyptology to its foundation. The mask that every human alive has seen in a photograph, the mask that defines our image of the ancient world, may not have been made for Tutankhamun at all. This is the story of how science looked straight through gold and found someone else's face. The discovery that led to all of this began on the 4th of November, 1922. Howard Carter, a British archaeologist who had spent 5 relentless seasons digging through the dust of Egypt's Valley of the Kings, was preparing for what many believed would be his final feudal season. His sponsor, Lord Carnarvon, had almost pulled his funding entirely. That morning, a water boy clearing rubble from the team's campsite struck something hard with his foot beneath the sand. It was a stone step. By the next day, Carter had uncovered a sealed staircase descending into darkness. He sent an urgent telegram to Carnarvon in England. At last have made wonderful discovery in the valley, a magnificent tomb with seals intact. Tomb CV-62 had been buried under construction debris from a later royal tomb built directly above it, hidden from looters for over 3,000 years. When Carter finally broke through the sealed doorway and held a candle up to the narrow hole, his hands trembling, Carnarvon asked from behind him, "Can you see anything?" Carter could barely find his voice. "Yes," he replied, "wonderful things." The burial chamber lay beyond 2 anterooms filled floor to ceiling with gilded furniture, chariots, statues, and precious objects. At the center of the innermost chamber, nested within 3 enormous coffins, the last of which was solid gold, rested the mummified body of the young king. And fitted precisely over his face and shoulders, sealed there by layers of hardened ritual resin and sacred oils poured out at the moment of burial, was the mask. Carter spent considerable time carefully heating and loosening the resins to extract the mask without damaging the incredibly fine metalwork. When he finally held it fully in his hands for the first time, he described it in his notes as unlike anything he had ever seen. But even in those earliest moments of discovery, Carter noticed something that bothered him. Something that would take 100 years and a machine that did not exist in his lifetime to fully explain. The doubts began almost immediately, even as the mask was being cleaned for the first time in a field laboratory. Archaeologists under magnifying lamps noticed a strange inconsistency in the quality of the golden metal surface. The face itself, the area covering the forehead, cheeks, nose, and chin, appeared smoother, more refined, and subtly different in color than the striped royal headdress and the back panel behind the head. It was as though 2 skilled craftsmen had worked on the same object, but from different sources of raw material. Carter recorded this in his diary. He wrote that the mask appeared upon close inspection as if assembled from distinct components that had been masterfully fitted together, but fitted, not born as one. A second, more troubling observation followed shortly after. The facial features on the golden mask did not quite match the other portraits of Tutankhamun found throughout the same tomb, the statues, the painted panels, the carved canopic jars. Those images typically showed a face with fuller, rounder cheeks and a distinctly shaped jaw. The golden face, by contrast, appeared more refined, more delicate. Some observers in Carter's time even used the word feminine. And then there were the ears. Both earlobes on the golden mask bore holes, the kind left by wearing heavy earrings from childhood. This was, to scholars of the period, deeply puzzling. In ancient Egypt, a strict cultural tradition governed the wearing of ear ornaments. Children of both sexes wore earrings. Women of high status wore them throughout their lives. But adult male pharaohs, upon reaching maturity and full kingship, abandoned earrings entirely as a sign of masculine royal authority. Tutankhamun died at approximately 19 years of age. By the standards of ancient Egypt, he was a full king, a warrior, a man. His own mummy, examined separately, showed no piercing marks on his ears whatsoever. The mask had pierced ears, the king's body did not. This was a direct contradiction that early Egyptologists simply could not resolve with the technology available to them. They recorded their suspicions and moved on. Some specialists quietly began to wonder whether the mask had originally been made for another member of the royal family, perhaps a woman of significant rank. But with nothing but their own eyes and intuition to work with, that suspicion remained exactly that. A suspicion, a footnote, a puzzle with no solution. Until the machines arrived. Carter also noted in his meticulous field journals that the hieroglyphic prayers inscribed across the back panel of the mask had been applied with varying degrees of force and depth, as if the texts had been engraved in two separate stages, by two different hands, or at two different moments in time. He further observed that the twin protective symbols affixed to the forehead, the royal cobra representing Lower Egypt and the vulture representing Upper Egypt, appeared to be attached to the mask via mounting pins that looked somewhat rougher and more functional than the exquisitely detailed face beneath them. As if those symbols had originally belonged to a different headdress entirely and been transferred here in a hurry. The collar concealing the join line between the face and the chest area also seemed, to Carter's trained eye, unusually thick and heavy, as if designed not purely for decoration, but to hide something beneath it. These observations, taken individually, could each be explained away. Gold artifacts of this complexity required enormous teams of craftsmen working over years. Small inconsistencies were natural. But taken together, they formed a pattern that pointed towards a single, almost unthinkable conclusion. Someone had rebuilt this mask. Carter could do nothing more than note these observations and file them away. He had no way to look inside the gold. No technology existed that could reveal the internal structure of a priceless artifact without physically cutting it apart. That technology would take 100 more years to arrive. The X-ray scanning of the golden mask of Tutankhamun was one of the most carefully planned scientific operations in modern archaeological history. Bringing the mask out from behind its climate-controlled display case required months of preparation, international permissions, and an extraordinary level of coordination between physicists, conservators, curators, and museum directors. The object weighs over 10 kilograms. Its surface is covered with hundreds of inlaid pieces of precious stone, lapis lazuli imported from Afghanistan, obsidian, carnelian, turquoise, and colored glass. Any vibration, any temperature fluctuation, any error in handling could crack ancient solder joints that have held for 3 millennia. The transportation from the display room to the scanning facility, a distance of only meters, required a custom-built padded transport frame, a full team of trained handlers in soft gloves, and temperature monitoring at every step. The scanning equipment itself had to be calibrated with exceptional precision for this specific object. Scanning gold with X-rays presents unique challenges. Gold is one of the densest materials on Earth. It absorbs radiation far more intensely than organic materials like bone or wood. The energy required to penetrate solid gold is significantly higher than standard medical or industrial X-ray equipment is designed to deliver. At the same time, the stone inlays in the mask, particularly the lapis lazuli, are far more fragile than the metal around them. Too much radiation intensity and the scan data becomes distorted. Too little and the gold is opaque. The team spent days running calibration passes on a precisely manufactured digital replica of the mask before the real artifact was brought in. No one knew exactly how 3,300-year-old gold would respond to high-energy scanning. No one knew what the ancient ritual resins coating the interior surfaces might look like under radiation. No one knew if there were hidden gaps or internal cavities that the resins had filled over the centuries as they slowly solidified. When the first scan data finally began appearing on the monitors, the room went very quiet. The initial X-ray images made one thing immediately, undeniably clear. The mask was not a single object. What the entire world had always seen as one seamless, unified masterwork of ancient goldsmithing was, beneath its perfect surface, a complex assembly of distinct components, components that differed from each other in measurable, scientifically significant ways. The face panel, the portion covering the forehead down through the chin, showed gold of extraordinarily high purity. Analysis of its elemental composition indicated an alloy with minimal impurities, a warm, dense, heavy gold that would have represented the finest material available in ancient Egypt. The striped Nemes headdress, the iconic blue and gold cloth-like covering, showed gold of a lower purity alloy, containing higher concentrations of silver and copper. Still precious, still valuable beyond modern reckoning, but distinctly, undeniably different from the face. Not slightly different, not the kind of variation you might expect from the same workshop using the same supply of raw gold across a multi-year commission. Different enough that the scanning team's metallurgical specialist stated plainly that the face and the body of the mask had to have come from different sources of gold and almost certainly from different time periods of manufacture. The X-rays also revealed what the polished outer surface had always hidden: seams. Running precisely along the boundary where the face met the headdress, the X-rays showed microscopic gaps, hairline separations, where two originally independent pieces of metal had been joined. The ancient goldsmiths had done extraordinary work concealing this join. They had polished it to invisibility. They had filled any gaps with gold paste and burnished everything flat. But the X-rays had no interest in surfaces. They passed directly through the gold and mapped the density variations within, and those density maps showed with clinical precision exactly where one piece of metal ended and another began. The face panel, the portion covering the forehead down through the chin, had been inserted into the headdress. Not cast together, not hammered from a single sheet. Inserted, fitted, like a panel placed into a frame. The discovery of the seam was startling, but the implications became truly extraordinary when the team turned the X-ray analysis to the hieroglyphic inscriptions on the back panel of the mask. The back panel carries one of the most sacred texts in ancient Egyptian religion, a continuous passage from the Book of the Dead, a series of divine invocations meant to guide and protect the deceased through the afterlife. These texts are addressed directly to the dead person by name, invoking that person's identity before the gods of the underworld.
Every royal burial mask carried this text, and every version of this text began with a name. The X-rays, combined with ultraviolet fluorescence imaging, looked beneath the visible surface of the hieroglyphic engravings, and they found that the name had been changed. Beneath the name of Tutankhamun, cut into the gold with precision tools, the imaging technology revealed earlier, suppler marks. The surface of the gold in that area bore traces of an older, more complex sequence of signs, partially erased by recutting, partially obscured by careful polishing, but not completely gone. The original inscription had been removed, the gold had been worked again, new text had been carved in its place. The team also detected that in at least 2 locations along the back panel, the depth and angle of the engraving tool marks changed abruptly, evidence that different hands or different tools had worked on the same surface at different times. Carter had been right 100 years ago when he recorded that the inscriptions seemed to have been applied in stages. He simply could not have known what those stages meant. The ear perforation findings, combined with the seam data and the metallurgical composition analysis, now began to converge into a single coherent theory. The mask had originally been made for someone else, someone whose name had been on the back panel before Tutankhamun's was carved over it, someone who wore earrings, which meant, given the cultural conventions of ancient Egypt, almost certainly a woman of royal status significant enough to commission or be given a golden burial mask of this extraordinary quality. The X-ray team was careful. They didn't assign the mask's original ownership to any specific individual. The evidence established that the mask had been reassigned. It did not name the original owner with certainty. But the perforated ears, the feminine refinement of the facial features, and the erased inscription all pointed in the same direction. The face the world knows as the face of Tutankhamun, the face reproduced on millions of posters, textbooks, documentaries, and museum gift shop mugs, was almost certainly cast to portray a woman. The reconstruction of events that the scanning data made possible is, once assembled, both logical and deeply human. Tutankhamun died suddenly, unexpectedly, at 19 years old. Whatever the cause of his death, infection, injury, a hereditary condition, or something more sinister, it struck faster than the royal court could prepare for. Creating a proper golden burial mask for a pharaoh was not a quick task. It required years of commissioned work by master goldsmiths. The gold had to be sourced, refined, assayed, and shaped over an extended period. The inlays had to be cut and fitted individually. The texts had to be composed and engraved by specialists. For a king who reigned only about 9 years and died without warning, that process had not been completed. The priests and court officials responsible for organizing the burial had 70 days, the traditional period of mummification and preparation, to assemble everything the young king would need for his journey into eternity. They did not have time to create what they needed from scratch. What they had was access to royal storage facilities containing the burial goods of predecessors, pharaohs and royals whose reigns had ended, whose names had been ordered erased, whose existence the new political order wanted forgotten. The Amarna period, the strange religious revolution instigated by Akhenaten, had left an enormous surplus of royal burial goods associated with people whose official memory had been condemned. The priests went into storage. They found a mask. It was magnificent, one of the finest objects any of them had ever seen. The face panel was made of near-perfect gold. The headdress was elaborately detailed. The workmanship was beyond anything that could be replicated in 70 days. But it was a woman's mask. The ear piercings were there. The name on the back panel was a woman's name. The subtle femininity of the facial structure was unmistakable to trained eyes. The decision was made. Working around the clock, the royal goldsmiths removed the original face panel. They replaced it with a new one, cast to show the features of Tutankhamun, made from the highest quality gold they had available, which happened to be from a different source than the headdress it was being attached to. They soldered the new face into the old headdress frame, polished the join to invisibility, and laid a massive
manic collar necklace across the shoulder area to further conceal the seam. The ear holes were filled, not perfectly, but well enough to pass inspection in dim torchlight. The name on the back panel was erased and recut with Tutankhamun's royal titles and epithets. The cobra and vulture emblems from another headdress were transferred and remounted, and the mask was placed upon the face of the young king, where it would remain in silence for 3,300 years. The significance of what the X-ray scans revealed extends far beyond the specific question of who originally owned the mask. For over a century, the golden death mask of Tutankhamun has been used as our primary visual reference for the pharaoh himself. It has been the central image in countless reconstructions of his appearance. It has appeared in forensic facial reconstruction projects. It has anchored our entire cultural imagination of what this young king looked like. If the face panel was cast to portray a different person, a royal woman of the generation before Tutankhamun, then the face we have been looking at as his face may not be accurate to his actual features at all. The mask, in this reading, is not a portrait of Tutankhamun. It is a portrait of someone whose name we do not yet know, adapted at the last moment to serve as the eternal companion of a king who died before his time. This realization does not diminish the mask in any way. If anything, it makes the object more extraordinary, because it is now not one story, but two. Two human beings, separated perhaps by only a single generation, both connected by this one golden object, one whose face it was made to carry, and one whose name it was made to speak. The X-ray scans also established definitively that ancient Egyptian craftsmen were capable of working at a level of technical sophistication that concealed their modifications from human examination for over 3 millennia. The invisible seams, the reworked inscriptions, the replaced face panel, all of it was done with such skill that not even the most expert human eye, examining the mask in person over the past 100 years, could penetrate it. Only physics could do what human vision could not. The broader implications for archaeology are profound. The same non-invasive scanning techniques used on the mask of Tutankhamun can now be applied to hundreds of other ancient objects whose histories are uncertain, whose attributions are disputed, or whose internal structures have never been examined. The Cairo Egyptian Museum alone contains tens of thousands of objects from the ancient world. Many of them have been classified, attributed, and described based entirely on visual examination and surface analysis. Some of those classifications may be wrong. The mask project demonstrated that high-energy X-ray fluorescence scanning, combined with computed tomography, can, under the right conditions, reveal hidden seams, compositional differences, erased texts, and construction details buried beneath surfaces that appear perfectly uniform to the naked eye. For Egyptologists, this is the equivalent of being handed a new sense, a way of perceiving ancient objects that bypasses the limitations of human vision entirely. Future scans of royal mummies, coffins, jewelry, and architectural elements may reveal similar hidden histories. Objects reassigned, names erased, identities transferred from the condemned to the celebrated. The ancient world was a political world. Pharaohs erased the monuments of their predecessors. Temples were rededicated. Statues had their faces recarved. Entire reigns were struck from official records. It would be naive to assume that the death mask of Tutankhamun was the only burial object ever repurposed, reassigned, and quietly set into the darkness of a sealed tomb.
There is something deeply moving about what the X-ray data ultimately reveals, not just the scientific findings, but the human story beneath them. A woman, a queen perhaps, or a ruling pharaoh in her own right, commissioned or was given a golden mask of breathtaking beauty. The mask was made with love, with reverence, with a craftsman's full devotion. It was intended to carry her face into eternity, to speak her name before the gods, to make her immortal in the only way ancient Egypt knew it. And then something happened. Her reign ended. Her name was condemned. Her existence was officially erased from the records of a civilization that believed a person ceased to exist when their name was forgotten. The mask went into storage with all the other beautiful, terrible things that official memory refused to carry forward. And then a young king died, a boy of 19, unprepared, suddenly gone, and there was no time to do things properly. The priests opened the storeroom. They found her mask. They put it apart and put it back together with someone else's face and someone else's name. And for 3,000 years, the woman who was supposed to look back at us from that golden surface was invisible, silent, erased completely, until X-rays tore through the gold and found her seams. She does not have a name yet, not one we can prove with certainty. But we know she was there. We know the mask was hers. We know that the most famous face in ancient history was made to be her face. And now we know. The final conclusions published by the research team are careful, measured, and appropriately hedged in the language of science. They confirm that the mask is a composite object, assembled from components of different origins and different periods. They confirm the metallurgical discontinuity between the face and the headdress. They confirm evidence of inscription modification on the back panel. They confirm the presence of ear perforations inconsistent with the established age and identity of the mask's official occupant. Taken together, these findings constitute what the team describes as compelling, convergent physical evidence that the mask was significantly modified before its final internment.